I'm excited also to speak with you because you do so much to, of course, engage with our people, but educate them.
Yeah, you can use that mic so you don't have to
Okay,
lean
all
over.
right. But I want to also correct you on something.
Yeah.
You talked about that I was home during a break. It's kind of like, I feel like I have two homes right now.
Yeah.
I feel like I've had two homes for a long time.
You do come back and forth, don't you?
Yeah. So I just want to make that clear. You know, I'm definitely a product of Gary, but also still I'm an Indiana registered voter.
Yeah.
All of that.
You're
so
just hanging out in Cambridge.
I'm just hanging out. You know, I've made some other folks adopt me for a little bit. But good to see you.
It's good to see you. And once again, thank you for being there. Well, first of all, you know, you're in law school now, aren't you?
That's right. I'm finishing my third year at Boston College Law School. It's been an exciting time, but trust me, I'm looking forward to that time winding down, but it's been a great experience.
Yeah.
You know, I went to Howard University.
HU?
Yeah, so a lot of times.
I'll tell you, if this woman behind you constantly brings the rivals into the studio.
Oh, that's why we have a hand tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to all HBUs.
Yeah,
and you know the wonderful, wonderful legacy schools that we all had the privilege of attending.
Right. So you're up in Boston. First of all, because I got so much stuff that I want to ask you. But what is it like in Boston? I used to shoot up there every once in a while, and when I first graduated high school, that was one of my colleges that I was, you know, my list of 5 in Boston University. I mean, Boston College was the college that I wanted to attend.
Yeah.
Of course, I ended up I was about to go to Howard, then ended up falling in love with Hampton. I'm glad I went to some HBCUs.
Yeah.
But my dream was to go up there in Boston, so I had some friends, and I always used to go up there. And, you know, while I always was fascinated with it, the people, some of my friends that were from there said, Jeff, you don't even have an idea about what it's really like up in Boston.
Yeah.
What's it like up there?
And unlike your experience at Howard would have been, and it certainly isn't like your experience at Hampton probably was. Boston is so white, number one, so that's obvious, you know, but it's also a place that, I lived in D.C. from the time I was 18, I think 22, 23.
Yeah.
And obviously I was born and raised in Gary, and the history of both of those cities was so connected to, you know, my own identity, you know, politics and black history, and of course, just that have contributed to our culture, but I can't say the same for Boston, although they're
going through some now, like look at what you have with your mayor.
Well, yeah, so the city had experienced its first sitting mayor. She wasn't the first black woman elected mayor, but she was the first sitting mayor, and then the first elected woman mayor, Michelle Wu, who I know very well and who I'm a fan of, was also a history maker in her own right. But, you know, I would say that there's some history in the city, right? With the Freedom Trail and some of the first free blacks being able to create opportunity and ecosystems for other free blacks. But I will say that it's just a little bit different for black folks. It can be a bit isolating.
Yeah.
And so they've got some work on their hands with retaining black talent. I mean, they certainly got some work on their hands retaining me. I'm trying to stay there that much longer, but you know,
Because listen, I mean, now full disclosure. You know, my political affiliation. I'm a Republican. I've been one ever since I was I've been one ever since I was 18. And I tried to, you know, I was a member of the chapter. We brought it back in Hampton, and then obviously at Tuskegee, Maryland as well. But in regard to that, Massachusetts has always been kind of very curious to me. And so when you look at, you know, Massachusetts, which is, you know, they elected Mitt Romney, obviously, but they're considered they're considered they're kind of the East Coast liberal state. You got California, then you got Massachusetts. Yet and still, it isn't until like 2018, 2019 that you get Ayanna Pressley, who, you know, is finally the first statewide elected U.S. congressperson of color to ever go down there. So what? I mean, I'm picking your brain, Jordan. So what's it really like? I mean, what's Massachusetts up to? I mean, what is their version of liberalism?
Yeah, their version of liberalism is actually transforming, Jeffrey. I think for some time it meant, you know, being able to support issues that were obvious civil rights infractions, like gay marriage, like, you know, making sure that some of our incarcerated population weren't being abused, and some people would probably argue that incarceration itself is abuse. But that was liberalism, I think, for some time in Massachusetts. But now it's really ensuring that there are actually pathways to leadership and out of poverty, and to receive a quality education and public health care, regardless of who you are. And I think that you see people like, as you mentioned, Ayanna Pressley rising top because they are unequivocally supportive of those issues. But then also you do people like Ed Markey, who technically is an older time Democrat, but who, despite his age and the generation he came up with,
I call him shoulder pads because he always looks like he's got shoulder pads.
Another Boston College Law School alum. But you know, he's also very supportive of this. Michelle Wu ran and won her mayoral bid on issues like free public transportation. And some people might be like, that should have been the case. But my point is, you know, it's no longer just acceptable to raise, as I mentioned, issues like gay marriage as liberal or progressive. You should have been supporting those things. You know, there are a lot of states and places that don't. But I think it's a step further into ensuring a quality of life across all races and populations, and of course, economic status.
Now, because I'm glad you kind of answered that, because the one thing that I think I've noticed is that, you know, when it comes to the city council in Boston, they have moved a lot farther than the state, or a lot faster than the state. And that's crazy because Boston seems like it would be the brain trust of the rest of the state, but that might not be the case. So what is it, why is it that Boston can be, you know, and this is, we're talking about progressive, you know, a battleground there. Why can Boston kind of go out here? They'll have people of color, women, Asians participating in the government of Boston, and yet when you look at the state and statewide offices and their representation to the U.S. Congress, why were they so slow, in your opinion, to come to that?
It might be because Boston councilors make a hell of a lot. No, I'm just kidding. Which they definitely do. But it reminds me of Gary and the Indiana State Legislature. I think Gary is the coolest city in Indiana. I don't think it is the coolest city. And Boston is the same for Massachusetts. But that word cool, I think, to me also means that there's some type of functional politics that people are able to establish. We have folks on our city council that don't think anything like each other. But there are at least some common issues, or, you know, some common goals that they can all work together. And that's the same with Boston, like free public transportation, like pushing back on police brutality and police abuse, and so many of the other issues that I think they've been able to move forward. That's not the case with the state legislature. I think that you also have to think about it. You know, there are folks driving into Boston with this feeling that they're coming into an elitist space from somewhere like Concord, Massachusetts, or, you know, all of these other further out cities. You know, you've got such a wide variety of backgrounds, representatives from the Berkshires, representatives from the Cape, representatives from Dorchester. That it's hard, you know, if you cannot.
And then you got to deal with that northern Massachusetts area that borders with Maine.
Exactly. And, you know, they've got a lot of rural interests. That, you know, to be honest, I don't even know if representatives from the city recognize some of the things that they deal with. So I think that they've got a tough time coming to some common ground, and it is reflective, as you mentioned, in the productivity that they're able to achieve.
We're talking with Miss Jordan Wilson. She is in her second home, hanging out with with us here on Wake Up GI with Jeffrey Smith. We appreciate it. Now I want to get back. Let's get back to you and, you know, talk about your origin, because I'm very interested. You and I have never really gotten an opportunity to talk about your experience in growing up here. So give me a little bit of your background. Like, of course, obviously you're a Gary girl. What schools did you go to?
Yeah, so I went to Banneker School, which I think is the coolest school in Gary.
Of course you would.
I'm happy to think that Banneker is still a place that there's a sense of, like, community. I don't know how other schools were growing up, but, like, my teachers whooped me. I know, like, people say that that's old. I'm not even, like, I'm really not old, but, like, that was something, like, we grew up with in Banneker. I'm still friends with my friend Chelsea, can tell you that, from Banneker, and I went there until I went to Bishop Knoll, which was an interesting experience. I'm still very I'm still friends with of my closer group there.
Yeah. So you're a Bishop Noel girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was an interesting experience, but it definitely did inspire me to want to go to Howard.
Yeah.
It was time to kind of get back to what I knew, but you know, it's so funny because I went to Bishop Noel and then I go to Boston College, right?
Right.
Very similar, but I was out for obvious reasons.
Exactly.
The
Catholic.
folks at Boston College kind of have a little bit different way of looking at things for obvious reasons. But
I'm sure you were received as a good Catholic girl. Am I correct?
No, I'm not Catholic though.
Oh, really?
No,
Oh,
not
I'm
at all.
Catholic.
No disrespect to Catholicism.
Right.
I'm not Catholic, but the Jesuits have, which is Boston College, this sense of that's actually why I went there.
Because they were Jesuits.
Yeah, because I mean, I had some other options, but I went there also because they offered some money. But
Well, there you go.
Yeah. But they have this sense of making sure you get a good job, obviously, that you are placed well in the world,
yes.
but that you are looking to make an impact.
Yeah.
And that was my upbringing. That is my upbringing.
Yeah.
Because I'm still being raised in some way by like the advice of so many other mentors like Chelsea.
Yeah.
And so my background obviously was in politics and public service with my mom having been a former mayor, but it was also just in the sense of finding out what you can do for others.
Right.
With anything you do. I have a lot of family members who are in finance. I have some other lawyers, obviously, and then I've got just a wide village of folks who do good things.
Yeah.
I can't tell you one person in my immediate background or even that I talked to today who is not trying to make the most out of their particular profession by making it impactful. And so that is like the background, the foreshadowing word of my opinion, which is impact.
Now let me ask you this, because I'm glad you brought that up, because you know, I think one of the things that people who did not grow up in the city of Gary, if you're just kind of on the outside, or maybe you are a transplant, you moved here, you don't really appreciate that there is a fabric here. I know when I was growing up myself and my friends, we grew up as the children of professionals, and you can kind of see it, Chelsea, other people. You know, our parents were out here, they were contributing, they were smart, they were educated, they were doing things. We're like the next evolution in a generation. And so a lot of times, whether you know it or not, you're being positioned or you're being led to possibly succeed or go down that path. So that's when I want to ask you. Obviously, your mom is a dual degree person from a very prestigious school. Your dad is a very prestigious guy. Did you know at a young age that you were going to get into law, or maybe you're artistic?
Actually,
maybe you thought you were going to do something else.
Well, I did want to be a singer at one point, but my mom told me you really cannot sing. She was like, she was like, you can't sing, and I was like, there's auto tune. I even told her last night, I was like, I think you're being kind of a hater. Because I could definitely have made something out of myself. I still might. I mean, I know how to read contracts.
There you go.
So, we'll
represent your own self.
Yeah, maybe I'll revisit you with a career transformation. But I knew, actually, I always wanted to be a lawyer. I wrote this book in 3rd grade that I said that. I said I was going to law school.
Yeah.
And so I had always known that. What I saw about law that I liked was that you are making the rules.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the case.
No.
But like as a kid.
That's what you thought.
Yeah, as a kid, I just saw that lawyers had so much autonomy over their lives. And I also saw that they had some type of control and influence in someone else's life.
Right.
Now, I know that at some point my mom was a prosecutor in her first years as a lawyer.
Right.
But she really has not spent her life as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And so I had never seen that side of law where, like, there's one lawyer who puts somebody in jail, there's one lawyer who keeps somebody in jail. That's what I grew up seeing from her, and that's what I loved.
So what was the application of your mom? Because, like I said, I remember my dad, my dad was a principal. And all I remember was watching him, and I think he did it on purpose when I was a little kid, but I watched him paddle some kids over at Edison, and all of a sudden I saw him in kind of this superhero, and I was scared of him for a minute.
Oh my God,
but you get to kind of see what your parents do for a living.
Yeah.
So you said your mom really wasn't a prosecutor that long, so when you saw...
Yeah, I never saw her as she was like...
You didn't see her that Perry Mason...
You
didn't see her that Perry Mason type lawyer. What was kind of the interpretation of what your mom
did? I saw her saving lives, like, literally. I mean, I saw her, like, keeping dads out of jail, getting parents, brothers, cousins.
Did you understand at the time what she was doing?
Yeah, and I had a different view of crime growing up. And it was that, no, I mean, well, I probably do. But, like, I also understood that, like, these are normal people who made mistakes. Some of them didn't even make mistakes. You know what I mean? Some of them might have been, like, at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Let me stop you there, Jordan. Do you understand about how unique this is? Because I'm going to tell you from the outside, your mom was a judge for a minute.
Right.
Okay, so your mom literally... I mean, you're the daughter of a judge, and so God, take your daughter there, or whatever you happen to be in there. You're looking at her issue, punishment.
And no, because she actually started the first drug court in the city. So again, that's just alternative sentencing for all the people who understand a little bit about law. But what that means is she was always somewhat bodied as a judge, and then obviously she is now and was as an attorney. Somebody who's interested in keeping someone away from a long sentence, from imprisonment, if that's even possible, and who does that with compassion. So, like, I saw drug court. I know people who have graduated from drug court. We've had families who have, though they've not been in drug court in Gary, have dealt with drug issues and abuse. Who recognize, and that helped me recognize that, again, this is a human thing, So I'm actually glad I never grew up in a prosecutorial home, no disrespect to anyone who did, but I think that I was able to develop such a humanistic view of working with clients, and although I don't have any intentions on practicing criminal law, haven't developed any of that experience yet, it's what helped me and continue to cultivate an interest in being a lawyer.
Now, one of the things that I remember when I first met you, and I remember subsequently when you kind of were graduating and you started to get into it, I saw that you had an interest in something that I do, and that is kind of politics. And so that's kind of one of the things that I got from my grandfather and my father, and it's just I'm a junkie, I'm a political junkie. I love to hear about it, read about it, and get out.
It is a drug, right?
It is a drug. And so let me ask you this, because of course you being the daughter of a politically ambitious person at the time, I mean, obviously I don't know the conversation that was had at the dinner table the first time when your mom probably came home and probably brought you into the circle, probably talked with your father first, but then eventually, you got in on the conversation. You said, guess what, I'm gonna run for mayor.
Yeah, like, why? Why? I don't understand why. Even, I mean, to her last day in office, I probably asked her, why did you not just win? But, I mean, there's this sense.
Do you remember that day?
Yeah, I remember that. I thought it was so bizarre. I was like, I could have sworn, there were 1,000 different things to do until I started to recognize this idea of service.
Right.
And that is the whole point. I mean, like, for those who are in posts like the mayor's office in Gary, for those who are serving in smaller cities, for those who are serving in larger. That's actually what service is. It's sacrificing anything else that you could be doing that seems to be more logical or seems to be easier. Certainly in her case, that was something I kept thinking. There are a lot of other things folks who are in office could be doing and that she could have been doing, but there is always going to be this feeling of like, is it even worth it, until you start to remind yourself that it's kind of on you to deliver your competence and your enthusiasm and genuine passion for serving our city through the form of service.
Now, obviously, locally, I guess the easiest reference would be the Hatcher Daughters, but I remember when I was younger, I remember, because I was an only child, Amy Carter, and then, I'm just saying, you look at all the young people, the children of politicians, and so I don't think a lot of us appreciate it. And as I said, I'm a political junkie and I like to get in there. But one thing I learned this from my dad and my grandfather, is that these people are human beings. And so I want to kind of get into, ask you about that, is that obviously, this is your mom. And while this is her day job, she's out here. Politics, you're not always going to please people. And then, of course, when campaigns come, sometimes things can get downright nasty.
Of course.
So what is it like being a daughter? And you're a smart girl. you know what your mom's up to, but the reality is it's your mom.
Right.
And you look at people like, you know what, I know this person, all right? You know, and now all of a sudden they say, well, what was that like?
It's frustrating. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely the type of person, like, so I'd be willing to fight for my mom. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, it's frustrating, but more than anything else, what's tough is to see her work diligently and for that always not to be received. But I had to kind of remind myself, especially in the last couple of years, that that would happen with anything.
Yeah.
There's stuff that the CEO of Citibank is doing that we have no clue. All we know is that they're like, you know, leeching capitalists.
Yeah.
There's stuff that the president of Howard University is doing that I probably don't know. All I know is I'm not feeling a lot of stuff he's done lately.
With the housing and all
that.
that.
He's done with the housing and that he's even done with so much extraordinary work that he's been able to do.
But he or she does not have to answer. They answer to a board, or they might answer to trustees.
They answer to trustees.
But the CEO answers to a board.
Yeah.
It's not the same as voters, your neighbors, people that you grow up, that you go to church with.
Yeah,
and
that's
all of a
the
sudden,
point.
yeah.
That's the point. The measure of accountability is different. It's public.
Yeah.
It, you know, plays out in such a different way. And so I think that there's a particular amount of pressure, but then this reality that folks like her recognize when you're in office, you know, and so she's kind of reminded me of that it's just something that comes with the job, that, you know, it is not by any way defining your life when you receive feedback or criticism, even when it's unwarranted. And so I think that it is added a special kind of perspective to me.
Yeah.
Some things are personal, some things are not.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do in that capacity, and the best thing that I at least try to remind myself is that the hard work will never go unappreciated.
Right.
Even if it's not publicly, you know what I mean? When you are like walking down a new bikeway, or you know, when
you can see a physical, tangible thing that your mom did.
When you're walking into a business that you like to patronize, like those are things that if it doesn't happen on Facebook, because Lord knows there's a lot that does, it happens even on a small scale, but even especially on the larger scale, it's exciting to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of.
Now, let me ask you this, because, you know, obviously, you know, when you're a parent, you want to kind of, you know, I guess the way it functions, you're supposed to evolve past your parents. And sometimes your parents are just high achievers, and you just want to kind of live up to your parent. And, you know, listen, your mom, a Gary girl, dual degree from a very prestigious institutional university. Did you ever feel any pressure? Because you seem like you kind of have kept things in perspective. You really do. You seem like you're kind of laid back. You're not too high. You're not too low. You kind of get it. You're even keeled. But you listen, we're human. When you kind of started to formulate yourself and figure out where you want to go to college, and you're in high school, and you look at your mom, and you look at the degrees, you're like, do I have to do this, or when I'm doing good enough? Did you ever feel pressure?
I definitely feel pressure. It doesn't come. I feel pressure now. I mean, it doesn't come from a sense of feeling whether I'm good enough.
Right.
But I'm like, what? How did you do all this? Like, I get so tired at the middle of a Zoom meeting. Like, how do you do this? Like, so one thing that I think has helped me kind of feel like I'm working my way towards not what she's doing, but my own thing.
Right.
And it'd be a little bit hard to compare the two because everything that she's done has been so rooted in purpose.
Right.
One thing I remind myself is if I'm having fun doing, working on things, and school is not always fun. Anybody who's been in law school understand that's not always going to be that fun.
Yeah.
But with other stuff, if I'm having fun, then I'm going to be successful. And that's one thing I would relay, especially to any young person listening to this. If you're having a good time and you enjoy the work, you're learning things. Yeah. If anything that you stay up doing till 4 a.m. or 3 a.m., which I do many times, you clearly love it. Yeah. Right? So it's hard if you continue to meditate on your goals to feel like you're not really working for something. You might feel a lot. I'm feeling some pressure to make a lot of this stuff actualize. Right. But,
give me an example.
And we can talk about this, but there are so many more goals that I have with politicking. Yeah. There are so many more plans towards expansion that I have, and sometimes I'm like, this is not happening soon enough. But, I'm a person who like looks at I mean, like lawyer, like I look at patterns,
Right.
facts, and things like that. And so a lot of times I have like this list of people who I really admire who's on that list, and I kind of like, what were they doing by this age?
Right.
Or because it can kind of get tricky by the age thing too.
Yeah, because don't do that. I've
Yeah.
done that too.
I
You
do.
know, don't do that.
I was just like, what was the measure of growth?
Yeah.
Like, what was, you know, what was the pathway? What
Yeah.
are some similarities? What are some differences? What are some obvious differences? Like, was the time just something that made a difference? And that's kind of how I.
Sometimes while you might have a
myself.
benchmark, you might not mentally or maturity-wise be at that level.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it
Yes.
doesn't always have to be
Yes.
that little benchmark.
You're absolutely right. And then I even look at some folks, and her included, I'm like, I don't even know if they would have been able to do some of the things I've done yet.
Yes.
You know, like I've started a business.
Yeah.
And so I think that I've started a couple of ventures actually.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they would have been able to do that. And so, you know, you kind of get stuck in comparison. I mean, I don't know if you're religious, but the Bible says that comparison is the deepest joy. I know that the comparison is the deepest sleep because you'll stay up late worrying about stuff that is just not your job to. So.
Oh my goodness, we're talking with Miss Jordan Wilson. She is, as I said, she's hanging out with us here today on Wake Up GI with Jeffrey Smith. We're very appreciative of this. I want to ask you a question. And this is kind of a law school question. And no, but it's right in your wheelhouse. So I'll set it up. Obviously, there was some very controversial, well, I don't know if it's controversial, but a very big topic of conversation, in particular as related to schools for the past half a year, was CRT, critical race theory.
Right.
And for the record, I appreciate critical race theory because I understand its origins. It was like in the 70s, and from what I gather, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, to me it was a logical investigation that maybe should have happened. After a while, you're looking at a percentage of the population, a small percentage that was taking on a large percentage of being incarcerated. And so there was an academic quest to find out reasonably why that's happening. And it was to be talked about in law schools, and then maybe it kind of matriculates into some of the graduate schools. It has now come down and been politicized, and now they're talking about possibly even putting in schools. It's been argued both sides. I hear it, but I'm not necessarily a fan of it being argued in the grade school level and things like that. But I wanted to ask you as an attorney, as a person who's been in law school, first of all, what is your thoughts about CRT? Because I do believe that it should be investigated. When you have a 13% of the population occupying about 70, 80% of being incarcerated, there have to be some factors out there.
Yeah, some not right, the math is not mathing. How could you possibly, I really believe, try to stand against our people, and not just black kids, but like white, Asian,
right.
Latinx. How could you stand against them being equipped with the knowledge about how our world works? That's all critical race theory is. I think it's a set of guidelines about what's going on with the social construct we've created.
Now let me ask you this, because this would be the pushback. That's why I'm glad you're answering this for me, so I can understand. Because what people would say or suggest is, I'm not arguing with you about that. But what about, how soon should we take away the naivete from young kids? Should we, in elementary school, should we teach white kids, black kids, boys and girls that they are different, instead of trying to live towards a utopian ideal that we're really all the same? Side factors really make us seem different, but we're really not.
Well, even there's this, one of my favorite books from the course that I started to get into, and it was just called Whiteness.
Yeah.
And it helped
that was
me learn,
the title of it.
Yeah, okay. It helped me learn about whiteness. You know, it helped me learn about the whiteness of law. It helped me learn about the whiteness of the way law is implemented throughout our society. And that's important stuff.
Now, once again, the pushback or the suggestion would be that what you're, and an academic at that high level, that should be talked about because you can comprehend it. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about young kids that really have not understand, they don't have empirical evidence, they haven't been in the world, could you possibly be giving them, weighing them down, i.e., telling a person of color, a child of color, that you are going to be judged differently, that you are better, that you can't do, or there are going to be obstacles against you, or making a white child feel insignificant or feel guilty, or things of that nature. Those are the arguments against bringing CRT down to that level?
I think it's empowering in anything.
Yeah.
If you can understand what type of mistakes people have made, I mean, through environmentalism, we
Right.
learned about what happened with like carbon gases,
Yeah.
all that stuff, and all the mistakes that were made with I don't know what y'all were producing in the 70s and 80s, but y'all did
I
jack
wasn't
this.
producing them at that.
Y'all jacked this ozone up.
So, just the interview.
Yeah,
I was 3 years old.
Okay, well, all right. Well, then, it might have been like your baby products or something. But the point is to learn how we could turn this environmental destruction around. You have to learn what happened. And I brought the 70s and 80s up because from my research, that's what really like triggered things, at least that we're facing in these times. And so I think when it comes to critical race theory, that's the whole idea. Like, you just have to learn where things went wrong, what some systemic mistakes are that are being made today. You can make this world better. I don't think critical race theory has to be taught from a lens of creating a burden for white children, or certainly not creating a burden for black ones, but it's really to empower them with the information they need to make a better world.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Was a great answer. That's kind of the answer I was looking for. You brought in, but I want to ask you this. You brought up something else that's close to my heart. I consider myself somewhat of a conservationist and environmentalist, and so I want to get your opinion about this. And I'm talking to you as a lawyer, okay? And I understand, maybe this isn't your expertise, but let's take for instance environmental racism, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, and I'm sure you believe in it.
Yeah, I do.
One of the arguments, or one of the things that's going on in the state of Indiana, Northwest Indiana in particular, and I'm somebody that has been wrapping my mind trying to see how this could be dealt with, and that is the emissions test. I know you're probably familiar with it. Out of 92 counties, only 2 counties in the state of Indiana have to go out here and get emissions tests for cars. Now, let me just tell you the irony of this. It is in these 2 counties that the majority of the people who are getting these cars are probably trying to get to work. They're getting beaters, they're getting used cars, and when these cars don't pass, obviously you got to put more money into it, and that is obviously going to impact you financially, or maybe you can't get a car at all.
It probably won't happen for a lot of people.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if you're looking at this from a legal approach, because obviously the federal government's position is, well, it's in the footprint, what I mean, of Chicago, and it's just got to happen, and that's the argument that they're making. But if we're a country that looks, and once again, I'm a Republican, it looks like we're kind of leaning towards states' rights. How can Indiana legally get under this? Because there literally are 2 counties that are being treated differently than the other 90.
And when you say how can Indiana legally get under this, you mean
get out of
this?
I mean, just from I know you probably would have to look at it, but I just want to get your opinion on it rather than, necessarily a ruling. Do you feel that that's kind of a little bit of environmental racism?
Yes, yeah. I actually made a comment to someone, a Boston native, the other day.
Yeah.
Or I guess the day before I left, so last week. And I was like, you know what? I've never met anybody out here with asthma.
Thank you.
And he was like, what? He was like, who has asthma? He's from Newton, which, as you know, is like a very nice suburb.
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And that just occurred to me, like, I've never met anybody out here or from here with asthma.
Yeah.
My point in saying that is, I don't know if, it's even a good idea to rely on this as a state thing.
Yeah.
Because in Boston, for instance, everyone has to have an emissions renewal every year.
Right.
Like, I got pulled over.
How dare you,
riding dirty, right? My car actually got towed.
Jordan, what?
Yeah. Because I didn't have a sticker.
Oh, see, there you go.
And my car's in good shape.
That's what happens. So, you're trying to live in 2 places.
I know, right? He said that. He was like, you must have got this from Indiana. He was like, what in the world? But I don't know if this should be relied on as a state issue in somewhere like Indiana.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't know if...
But see, this is where I'm asking you as a person who was in law school, because... Listen, laws are not going to be all things to everybody, but there are certain things I believe as a non-lawyer of an unintended consequence. And while I get the principle, I was born with asthma, thank God I grew out of it. A lot of my classmates in elementary had some form of respiratory type of ailment. I understand what U.S. Steel is doing. We got to clean the air up. However, having said that, here we are in 2021. And these emissions, they do cause problems for people. I've literally seen people that had to scrap their car because they can't get whatever is needed to get fixed. It is having an economic impact on the most vulnerable people in this state who can't afford to kind of sit around here and say, well, I guess I'll get a new carburetor. You know, they just can't do it. If they save up that $1,300 to get that tax refund check and they finally get that car, they're praying that it passes emissions because this is going to help change their life.
Yeah, I don't want to give away any secrets, but I know some local stuff we could probably do. I have some ideas. I'll tell it to the right people. But
look at her. She's riding dirty now. She got secrets.
But what I will say is, I don't think that what if in a perfect world this would be a local issue.
Yeah.
Our mayor, council people, state representatives, and state senator know us better than the other part of those cohorts, especially the state ones, do.
Yeah.
And so in a perfect world, this actually, I don't think emissions and like the idea of emissions should be completely wiped out. I think that's actually a good idea. But the financial barrier that it proposes is a real thing, imposes.
Yes.
And so I think that in a perfect world, this would have been a local issue.
Right.
That the city of Gary could sort of figure out on its own. But in terms of where we are now, I do think it probably takes some lobbying the state to recognize. Like, you could even, there are some ways you could create like a, well, like if you're in, like you said, like these particular counties, why don't we say, you know, why don't we create new rules for older type of car?
Right.
Or why don't we like revisit the rules to look at what kind of damages are actually environmental issues? I think that type of revisiting of the laws could really help us. So since it's already on the books by the state, maybe whoever's listening to this, you know, you guys can go to Indianapolis and get them to reconsider some things for our counties.
I know the county council is unanimously got together and they're trying to push forward a lawsuit. But it is, you know, I've heard the arguments for years, and I just thought I'd pick your brain. We're talking to Ms. Jordan Wilson. Of course, she's hanging with us today on Wake Up GI. We're learning a lot. We're appreciating it. Thank you.
I'm learning a lot from you.
So let's talk about like your plans. I mean, you know, I'm not asking you to go into to the future and lay everything out for me. Let me find out some stuff on my own. But you know, obviously, as we've been talking, you've got an affinity for politics. You love it. You grew up in it. Your mom was a very skilled political player. She was the center of a lot of politics around here. So just by osmosis, you're going to get access to a lot of things that a lot of people don't get to see. You get to see the wheeling and dealing and obviously get an appreciation for it. Having said all that, are you ever interested in going into politics yourself?
I would be. Maybe not in that capacity as mayor, but you know, that's something that I definitely haven't ruled out. I also think it's interesting because we live in a different world now where, like, your senator, like, or your state legislator can also be like an author, have 30,000 different jobs, like Stacey Abrams, or like, you know, represent cases like Bakari Sellers, who I've spoken to and has said he plans on running for Congress. Again?
Didn't he come from South Carolina?
Yeah. So, but I guess he plans on running. But, you know, he just represented the Charleston Nine.
Right.
In a historic lawsuit.
Yeah.
And that doesn't bring them back, but that's important.
Yeah.
And so my point is that's kind of something that pushes me to continue considering running for office. I definitely would never be the type of elected official who's focused on that exclusively. And I don't even think I would be useful unless I continue to have real world engagement.
Yeah.
And so...
Do you think we've got too polarized? I mean, listen.
Oh, absolutely. Even within our own party, we're too polarized.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, let me tell you this. I've always said this, and you know, obviously there's a lot of easy targets to say about the Republicans, pure point blank. But I am starting to see a lot more people your age and things like that, because I'm a member of a group, the Conscious Conservatives. That's what they're called.
Yeah, you know. That sounds like a rap group or something. I like that.
You know what I'm talking about. And a lot of 35, 40-year-olds and even younger that are just starting to come in there. In particular, maybe because, and they're not committed to the Republican Party. It's just that they're committed to certain ideals and possibly even forming another party. Let's just be honest. It's not like anybody's bowing down to the Republican Party. However, saying that, the one thing I've always said about the Democratic Party, and I think it's their biggest blessing, but it's also a curse, is that you're just a huge tent. There is a lot of interest groups that call the Democratic Party home.
Right.
And a lot of times, if you are a national politician, those chickens are going to come home to roost.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, and as well they should. That's what political action is about. It's about supporting, it's about lobbying, and when your guy or your girl gets in there, it's about saying, hey, remember me? We helped get you in here.
That's right.
And so I got no problem with that. But the Democrat Party has more of a challenge because they've got groups coming at them from all times. I mean, from all different directions. Look at the Joe Manchin.
Right.
And I know a lot of people consider
I don't
him.
know. I think he's playing Democrat.
I know everybody says that. Everybody says that. And he might be because the coal miners are now coming out asking him to switch their vote.
Right.
But having said that, the West Virginia Democrats, even with the Rockefellers, have always had to align themselves with that. When you had Barack Obama who was running, and he had to kind of pull back a little the first time when he was like, you know what, we're going to get rid of coal miners.
Right,
And then he had to kind of slow because you all have all those different groups. And I think it's a good thing.
You said you all.
The Democrats.
Who's you all?
Okay, all right. You're not a Democrat?
I just asked, who's you all?
The Democrats.
Huh. I thought you would have meant black people or something.
No, see, I like that.
Huh.
I like that. There you go. That's another thing. You have those interests that are under the Democrat Party. But I was just being very generic about it.
I'm with the Black American Party. So whatever.
I knew it. I knew it.
In all seriousness, whatever and whoever is for the best interests of my people.
Thank you, Jordan.
I'm standing behind.
Thank you, Jordan.
Now, a lot of times those aren't the Republicans.
No.
But sometimes they are.
Thank you. Why don't we do that? Why can't we evolve to that? I mean, where we are mercenaries.
Yeah.
Where we are, instead of kind of allying ourselves or just giving our vote away at the very beginning, why don't we, and dare I say, why don't we use the tactics of the LGBTQ, which is, this is what they did. I know they seemed like they were very much, but the log cabin Republicans and all those people, the LGBTQ has set about and become a very powerful group because they have made sure that their voting bloc is well known and that both sides understand it, and so they have people listening to them. When are we going to do that?
Remember what I said about, I think it's just this idea about us not really embracing the idea that what we do now is not working.
Thank you.
Like, we have to actually accept that. You know what I mean? Like, how people just go on with the relationship for a long time. It's like, you don't feel like you could be doing any better than this? Like, it's kind of like, it gets bizarre. So at some point, you're like, really?
Definition of insanity.
Yeah. And so that's what I think black folks' relationship with the Democratic Party is. It's a dysfunctional relationship.
Yes.
And it's one which it looks cool on Instagram and Facebook sometimes, and like, I saw y'all on the news, like, or we talk about, like, I remember 2008, like, 2008, are y'all serious?
Yes,
like,
yes.
There are people who are running for office now, or like, that there are people born around that time who are like fully grown people. And so, like, my point in saying that is, I think it's just a point of accepting that what we know now is not working. What's happening now with the Republican Party, though, and black people, I would argue, is not working. What's happening with
I would say this, and it's because my first time ever casting a vote when I was in 12th grade, I voted Republican. The only time I've ever voted Democrat was in 2008 for Barack Obama. For first time for obvious reasons, and I didn't apologize for it.
Yeah.
It was something that needed to happen. It was history, and he's the right guy for the job. I thought he was intelligent.
Yeah.
I didn't really care about all of his politics, but I just thought it needed to happen. I wanted to be a part of it. Second time, he kind of moved to the center, and I liked his politics. I mean, I watched him when he was going against Mitt Romney. He was the same guy as Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was trying to be him. I said, why not?
That's so true.
So it was logical at that time. But I guess what I would say now is, the Republicans, and this is their problem, I've said this even when we used to go to conventions, is that the Republicans have just thrown away the black vote. If they get it, oh my God, it's just like getting dessert when you didn't even want it. But they're not going out here cultivating it, and that's going to be to their detriment. It looks like they're trying, but not on a large enough scale.
Also, I think you are probably the first this is probably the first real intelligible conversation I've had, and I'm not insulting other Republicans that I've spoken to, but particularly when I speak to a lot of black male Republicans, it turns into something about Trump, but I'm like, he just became a Republican. Why are we even talking about Donald Trump? I mean, seriously, that's such a small part.
I got ridiculed because I didn't want Trump to run. I knew he was going to blow up the party.
And I mean, he did.
Yeah.
So I would say, though, when you talk about why we're afraid to be mercenary, why we're afraid to embrace the party that my great-grandfather,
Yes.
was a part of, and so many of our other families. I was reading Condoleezza Rice's book,
Yeah.
and she talked about her embracing republicanism because that's what she knew. That's
Right.
what raised her. That's what her association was with civil rights
Right.
and the right to vote. And so I think it's just a matter of accepting reality. We really have to check our perspective about what's happening with the major party system.
Yeah. As we come up on it, I want to thank you for this, Jordan. I'm emotional. I'm mentally stimulated, and I really am. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I want to ask you this finally. As you kind of come back between your two homes, I'm gonna let you claim both of them. What are your thoughts about you've got the right to make an opinion, so I'm not putting you on the spot. This is your hometown. What do you see for Gary going forward? Because I got my ideas, and I'll sum it up quickly. One of the things that I've said, and I was talking about this with some members of the council, and I'll just say it all the time. I believe that the city of Gary needs a bad guy. And what I mean by that is I think that, I love the Prince administration. I supported with your mom. But I think that, in the very near future, there needs to be somebody that runs for mayor here that knows very good and well that they won't get elected the next time. Because when they get in office, they're going to make some hard choices that will make their successors very happy going forward. And what I mean by that, there's going to be some things you got to tear down. There's going to be some communities you got to kind of consolidate, make partials. And you had to go out here and get people like you and aggressively get people like you to come move back here and live in those Broadway lofts and open and draw in commercial businesses and things like that want to come after people like yourself, up and coming professional middle class young people with disposable income. And I know, and no disrespect to our seniors, but we need to make a concerted effort for that. That's my opinion, and I think in the end it would benefit everybody. Now, you can't just run when our population is the way it is right now, where we don't have a lot of you, and kind of tell seniors, well, we're not going to really concentrate on you right now, or tell the young people that aren't really doing anything right now that, we're not going to concentrate on you. You either get your 10 fingers, 10 toes out there and do something and contribute, or you're going to be left behind as well. So as I say, I think we need a bad guy. So I'm kind of setting the premise up for what are your thoughts.
Who's the bad guy? Are you running?
No.
Oh, okay. No. Is that your campaign? No.
I wouldn't say it.
I'm just playing.
I wouldn't say it until after I got in there. Then you'd be like, oh, he's the bad guy.
All I want is for the opportunity to be like, see, I told y'all. He told me that was kind of his setup. I think that positive change is on the horizon for the city if it's going to move in a good direction.
Yes.
Now, if we end up wanting to stay the same and stagnating, and I don't know.
We can't keep everything that was here.
If we kind of end up just figuring out who's going to be in this office, if we continue to kind of roll with the status quo and like chicken fighting almost, if everybody's cool with that, keep it how it is. That's the best suggestion. But if we're supposed to move in a positive direction and when people talk about revitalizing, I don't think they get what that means. Or I don't think they realize from a young person's perspective like me what it should mean. It doesn't just mean going to Gary, and I used this earlier as a small example, but it doesn't just mean seeing a Walgreens, seeing a Walmart. Those things are great. Love it, but it means being able to come back to community.
Yes.
It means being able to find a group of like-minded folks. They don't even have to be young people.
Right.
But it means being able to plan out your future in the city for somebody like me instead of having to figure out what's the most affordable place out east I might be able to live.
Exactly.
And so
it means putting cap on dollar stores.
It means right. I mean, if I ever need something, I know Dollar General is around. And shout out to them because clearly they feel Gary. But and so I have heard that used by our current administration and so many others, and I think it's an interesting use of the term by them because it doesn't just mean making things look like they're good. It means making a promising future for us.
Right.
It means making a promising future. I'm paying attention to what's happening because I understand that everything has consequences.
Yeah.
And so I think that electing folks who really embrace that idea and who are future-minded folks, like you said, a bad guy who realizes what I'm doing right now might not help me on the next election cycle, but it's definitely going to help the next generation. I think electing more folks like that. It doesn't even have to be a bad. I like that theory, but I don't know. It doesn't have to be a bad guy. It just has to be someone who's a futurist.
But it's gonna hurt.
It probably is. You're right. because we don't. Yeah, you're right. We get into that. You're right.
It's gonna hurt.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's what I think the future means. I'm excited. I think it can happen. I'm happy to support those folks who do.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, if that's me at some point, I'm happy to put myself out there that way. But it's gonna have to happen, or else there will be some irreparable negative consequences that I'm not a fan of seeing.
Absolutely. Jordan, I very much appreciate it. Ms. Jordan Wilson, thank you for
I want to shout out real quick.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Give me all the
for
shout-outs.
everyone, if you enjoyed this conversation today and want to know some of the same things I know, download Politicking. It's a political information platform that will enable you to learn more about candidates for this upcoming election cycle in 2022, when folks like Reagan Hatcher and Kimberly Robinson, who's a Calumet Council trustee, will be running for re-election.
Yeah.
Maybe some new people who are running against them. But I would just implore you to download the app, because it's also an opportunity to know what you're talking about for all parties.
Yeah.
We talked about the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the Independent. I really have no interest in telling people which party to vote for. I only want them to engage more. So if you download Politicking, Politicking, on Google Play, or also in the iOS store, you'll have a world of information. And I would ask everyone to do that now. You can also follow us on social media, on Instagram at Politicking, and on Facebook at Politicking. And you download it. Tell me what you think. I might make you an investor. I mean,
I'll download it.
Yeah, download it and just share your thoughts. But thank you. This is like the highlight of my week. Seriously.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. No, I'm gonna download it. I'm gonna see what's going on there, because I knew you were doing it. I didn't know you had your apps out there. Look at you.
See, this might have been my pitch to you. I'm serious.
We'll get you back on here, Jordan. Make sure that you tell your mother and your father have a great holiday. And I want to thank you for coming. Thank you, Chelsea. C. Witt in the house for coming through here, and everybody just have a great holiday. We're going to see each other back, and you got to come back on here. Keep us updated. You might be our correspondent.
All right. Let me know. I'm always looking to figure out again how I can do what you're doing, which is just educate our folks.
All right. I appreciate you. There you go.